I'll always remember the expression on my son's face when he turned against me. It wasn't an anxious grin or a remorseful one, just a cocky, content smirk as he lifted his champagne glass from the opposite side of the rehearsal dinner table. To Mom, Ralph declared to his fiancé's relatives, who were practically unknown to me even with the wedding so close. "Thanks for the wedding gift. We couldn't have pulled it off without you." Puzzled whispers and courteous clapping spread through the seaside eatery. I held my face steady, drawing on decades of corporate deal-making to stay composed while I tried to figure out what he meant. What wedding gift? I'd agreed to give $10,000 toward their event, a substantial amount by anyone's measure, but evidently not enough for Ralph and Alexis's lavish preferences. Alexis let out a laugh, her diamond rings sparkling in the candle glow as she gripped my son's arm. "We should let her know," she whispered dramatically, loud enough for all to catch. "Let me know what?" I inquired, holding on to my grin even as dread crept along my back. Ralph tapped his knife on his glass once more, drawing the focus of all 30 attendees at the rehearsal dinner. "As everyone here knows, Alexis and I have been organizing the perfect wedding. The Rosewood Resort, exquisite cuisine, premium everything, because my stunning bride merits only the finest." He stopped for approving whispers. "But excellence carries a cost. In this instance, roughly $100,000. The space buzzed with odd mutters. I almost sputtered on my water. $100,000. I'd reviewed the initial quotes around $60,000, which had already struck me as over the top. So Ralph went on, "We needed to think outside the box for funding. That's when I thought of Mom's small seaside home in the Hamptons. You know, the one she goes to perhaps twice annually." My pulse halted. The beach home, my haven, the spot I'd bought following my divorce, my compensation for 2 decades in an emotionless union with Ralph's dad. The sole luxury I'd ever granted myself. "Ralph," I stated firmly, my grin fading. "What do you mean?" "We sold it," Alexis chimed in delightedly. "Last month, the market's booming at the moment. We fetched nearly double what you spent on it 15 years back." The surroundings blurred in front of me. "You sold my home?" Ralph chuckled as though I'd cracked a humor. "Technically, Mom, but let's be real. We all knew you intended to pass it to me eventually. We simply sped up the schedule a little." "A little?" I echoed, my tone empty. "How did you even? Remember when you were ill last winter and I assisted with your documents? I kept that power of attorney. Thought it could prove useful one day." He winked at his soon-to-be father-in-law, who laughed approvingly at my son's cleverness. "That was for health choices," I uttered, my throat tightening. "Not for anyway," Ralph proceeded, hoisting his glass upward. "Let's raise a glass to Mom's amazing wedding present. The greatest aspect is she didn't even need to go shopping for it." Chuckles spread among the group as glasses clinked. Only Alexis's mom appeared to detect an issue, her gaze shifting uneasily between my rigid expression and her daughter's victorious one. I rose suddenly, my chair dragging across the wooden floor. "Pardon me," I whispered, making my way to the bathroom on unsteady legs that wobbled with every movement. Once by myself, I clutched the marble sink, gazing at my image in the mirror. Judith Campbell, 58, head of Campbell Enterprises, brought to quivering astonishment by her own offspring. The beach home, my beach home, disposed of without my awareness or approval to finance an outrageously pricey wedding for a son who obviously viewed me as little more than a cash machine with parental feelings. I dashed cold water on my face, allowing the surprise to solidify into something firmer, something I'd never permitted myself to direct at Ralph previously. Icy, strategic rage. Because there was one thing my beloved son was unaware of. Something that would erase that arrogant smirk from his lips and potentially ruin the wedding he'd so heartlessly financed using my asset. The beach home wasn't truly under my name. For taxation reasons, I'd shifted ownership to Campbell Enterprises years earlier. A fact hidden in records Ralph wouldn't have reached, even with that outdated power of attorney he'd retained. Legally, he hadn't disposed of his mother's beach home. He'd illicitly sold business assets owned by a limited liability corporation, my corporation. I adjusted my blazer and refreshed my lipstick, a strategy already taking shape. I had brought up my son to think he deserved all I possessed, and that was my error. But I wouldn't worsen it by permitting him to rob me. When I came back to the table, I displayed a grin that failed to touch my eyes. To the joyful pair, I stated, elevating my glass. May you receive precisely what you've earned. The day following the rehearsal dinner, I phoned in unwell to my own workplace for the initial time in 15 years. My administrative aide, Barbara, understood me sufficiently not to probe, though worry tinged her words. Is everything okay, Judith? You never skip work. Just handling a personal matter, Barbara, I answered, my tone deliberately even. Can you forward me the documents on the Hamptons asset and link me with Marcus in the legal department, please? While anticipating the files, I brewed a robust mug of coffee and positioned myself at my home workspace desk. The daze from the prior evening had dissipated, substituted by a boiling indignation I scarcely identified within myself. I had consistently been the mediator, the supplier, the one who resolved conflicts when Ralph's father acted irrationally during the separation. When had that evolved into becoming a pushover? My computer chimed with an arriving message from Barbara holding the asset papers. I examined them swiftly, verifying what I already recognized. The beach home had been lawfully moved to Campbell Enterprises 5 years prior as component of my fiscal plan. Ralph's name was absent from the title. The telephone sounded, Marcus responding to my request. Good morning, Judith. Barbara indicated it's pressing. Marcus, I require your absolute confidentiality on this. I started, then outlined the circumstances in detached language, as if addressing an instance of business deceit instead of my son's disloyalty. Marcus's quiet whistle resonated via the speaker. That's genuinely multiple offenses. Deception, falsification, possibly mistreatment of an older person considering the context. I'm not exactly old, I remarked wryly. In legal terms, exploiting a parent above 55 counts. But the primary concern is the deceitful disposal of company assets. Have you verified the transaction truly completed? Not yet. That's my upcoming call. Don't place it, Marcus recommended. Allow me to manage this legally. If your son utilized a fabricated power of attorney to dispose of assets owned by Campbell Enterprises, we must act fast to invalidate the deal and alert the purchaser. And my son? I questioned, my voice faltering despite my determination. Marcus hesitated. Judith, I must be straightforward. What you've described is unlawful behavior. If we act to safeguard the firm's holdings, which we ought to, Ralph might encounter severe accusations. I shut my eyes, picturing Ralph in restraints. In spite of all, my parental urge surged, pressing me to shield him, to discover an alternative. Then I recalled his arrogant grin, the nonchalant manner he'd revealed pilfering my refuge, the joyful involvement of his fiancée. Do what's required to defend the company, I stated at last. I'll manage the individual aspect. After ending the call, I remained still, gazing at the wedding invite displayed on my desk. Cream-colored paper with golden lettering declaring the marriage of Ralph Campbell and Alexis Thornton. 3 days away, $100,000 of pilfered funds. My phone vibrated with a message from Ralph. Found the ideal mother-of-the-groom outfit at Nordstrom. Dispatching it with the seamstress this afternoon. Don't fret about the price. Don't fret about the price. As if I hadn't been bankrolling his whole existence. Tuition at Yale, the initial payment on his New York City flat, the rental on his BMW, the charge card statements that mysteriously always became my duty when he fell short at month's end. I'd done it all eagerly, convincing myself it was a mother's role, what affluent mothers ought to do. What an idiot I'd been. My phone rang once more, an unknown number with a Hamptons prefix. Mrs. Campbell, this is Richard Oakes from Eastern Shore Realty. I'm contacting you regarding the finalization on your seaside asset. There appears to be an inconsistency with certain documents, and we need to. Mr. Oakes, I cut in, I'm informed of the matter. You ought to know that the transaction was deceitful. My son lacked legal right to sell that asset since it belongs to my firm, not me individually. You'll hear from our business counsel soon. Quiet extended over the connection. I see. This is extremely unusual, Mrs. Campbell. The purchasers have already transferred the money and anticipate occupying next week. That's regrettable for them, but the deal is void. The asset was never mine to dispose of or my son's. With all respect, Mrs. Campbell, your son supplied a power of attorney and a fabricated paper for an asset not in my private holdings, I interrupted sharply. Would you prefer to be listed as a co-defendant in the deceit case, Mr. Oakes? Because I'm willing to include you if you enabled this deal without adequate verification. Additional quiet. Then I'll anticipate communication from your lawyers. After disconnecting, I retrieved a notepad and started compiling a list. Bank profiles to lock, charge cards to terminate, trust distributions to pause. If Ralph desired monetary autonomy, I would provide it to him fully and permanently. My phone vibrated again with another message from my son. By the way, can you handle the last payment to the Rosewood tomorrow? $50K owed before the practice run. I gazed at the note, astonished by his boldness. Not only had he taken from me, but he anticipated I'd keep supporting his excess. Rather than replying, I accessed my computer and composed an email to the event coordinator, location, food provider. And each supplier noted on the detailed chart Ralph had distributed months earlier when he'd initially included me in the wedding arrangements. To whom it may concern, I am notifying you that, contrary to any information you might have received, I will not assume financial liability for any costs associated with the Campbell-Thornton wedding set for this Saturday. As I pressed send on the final message, an odd feeling of tranquility enveloped me. For the first time since my separation 15 years prior, I was prioritizing myself, guarding what belonged to me rather than offering it up on the shrine of motherly duty. The doorbell chimed, and I checked my timepiece, likely the seamstress Ralph had referenced, arriving with the gown I'd never requested and no longer planned to don. Instead, when I opened the entrance, I came eye to eye with Alexis. Her flawlessly streaked hair pulled into a relaxed bun, high-end sunglasses resting atop her head. Judith, she welcomed me with cheek kisses. I decided to stop by and see how you're doing. You departed so soon last night. We were concerned you might be getting ill. Her worried pitch didn't match her shrewd gaze, which evaluated my look for indications of the resentment she obviously assumed I harbored. How considerate, I responded, not welcoming her inside. I'm okay. Just using a day to absorb everything. Her grin wavered a bit. Absorb? Oh, you mean the beach home? I hope you're not bothered by that. Ralph promised me you'd be delighted to help with our memorable day. Did he? I angled my head, examining the young lady who believed she was on the verge of wedding into riches and status. And what else has Ralph promised you, Alexis? That I'd cover your vacation, your initial residence together, education for your future kids. Her grin grew fragile. Well, he did note that you've always been extraordinarily giving, that you grasped the value of kin. I do grasp kin, I concurred. I'm just uncertain if you and Ralph do. Her gaze tightened. What does that imply? It implies, I stated gently, that you should review your correspondence, Alexis. Both of you. I dispatched something unique this morning. Our wedding present, she inquired, cheer returning to her words. I grinned, considering the repossession alerts and deceit claims that would reach their flat via registered post in a way. Now, if you'll pardon me, I have crucial matters to address. As I shut the door on her bewildered expression, I experienced something I hadn't felt in ages, the fulfillment of defending myself, no matter the outcomes. The wedding was 3 days out, and I had just ignited the spark on an explosive that would shatter everything to pieces. Let them attempt to clarify to 300 invitees why the site had withdrawn and the food providers weren't appearing. Let Ralph confront the repercussions when the beach home he disposed of proved to be undisposable. My phone rang. Marcus from legal once more. Judith, he stated directly. We submitted urgent orders on the asset sale and informed the buyers of the deceitful character of the deal. But there's another thing you ought to be aware of. What is it? We obtained Ralph's credit history as part of preparing our argument. He's accumulated nearly $200,000 in charge card debt across 8 accounts. 3 of them list you as an approved user. The disclosure shouldn't have stunned me, but it did. Shut those profiles, I directed right away. And forward me the complete history. I want to understand precisely what I'm confronting. There's additional, Marcus went on. He secured a personal advance last year for $50,000 using your beach home as security, or what he asserted was your beach home. The records are chaotic, Judith. He's been reckless with your persona and holdings for years. The ground appeared to shift under me. Years. This wasn't a single frantic step for an opulent wedding. This was a sequence of trickery from the offspring I'd given up everything for. Do what you must, Marcus, I stated, my tone toughened. No more gentle treatment. After disconnecting, I dropped into my seat, a fresh truth enveloping me. This wasn't merely about recovering my beach home anymore. This was about recovering my existence from a son who had taken advantage of my affection repeatedly. My doorbell chimed again, probably the seamstress this time. But I had no plan to wear a mother-of-the-groom gown to a wedding that, if I had any influence, wouldn't occur at all. Ralph stormed into my high-rise without rapping at 7 that night, his expression red with fury and alarm. Trailing him, Alexis lingered in the entry, her prior assurance swapped for barely hidden distress. "What in the world, Mom?" Ralph yelled, brandishing a bundle of documents. "I just received calls from the site, the food provider, the flower arranger, everybody. They're all claiming you've pulled the funding and the wedding is canceled." I stayed seated at my desk, appearing serene despite my pounding heart. "Pleasant evening to you as well, Ralph. I notice you've gotten my notifications. Is this a prank?" He flung the papers onto my desk, the repossession alerts and legal papers Marcus had dispatched. "Deceit claims orders. What are you attempting to achieve?" "I'm not achieving anything," I responded calmly. "I'm merely safeguarding what's mine. The beach home you disposed of, it wasn't yours to dispose. It wasn't even mine, strictly speaking. It belongs to Campbell Enterprises." "That's absurd," Ralph sneered. "It's your home. You've used it personally for years. As a company benefit, yes, but lawfully, it's held by my firm. Something you would have uncovered if you'd troubled to examine the asset records before committing deceit." Alexis at last entered the flat completely, her pitch high. "You're simply trying to wreck our wedding because you're envious. You can't bear to witness Ralph joyful." I regarded this lady, this outsider who was meant to become my daughter-in-law, and sensed only compassion. "Alexis, I've devoted 32 years to making Ralph joyful. I've covered his schooling, his flat, his vehicle, his way of life, even his charge card bills when he neglected payments. If I aimed to make him unhappy, all I'd have needed was to cease issuing checks years ago. This isn't about funds," Ralph maintained, though the frightened glint in his eyes implied otherwise. "This is about you dominating everything as usual." "Dominating?" I repeated, real astonishment in my tone. "Is that how you perceive my assistance?" "As domination. What else would you label it?" he retorted. "The ongoing checkups, the inquiries about my profession, the recommendations on my expenditures. It's overwhelming. I examined my son, this attractive, privileged man who had once been my endearing young boy, and pondered where I had erred so gravely. "Ralph," I said softly, "I never demanded anything back for my monetary aid, except that you lead a decent life. Be compassionate, labor diligently, discover joy. I didn't even demand you follow a particular job or companion. So, kindly clarify how my liberality turned into domination in your view." He stumbled briefly, then recovered. "That's beside the point. The point is you're attempting to demolish my wedding over a confusion about the beach home." "A confusion?" I laughed, the noise brittle even to me. "You imitated my signature. You fabricated legal papers. You disposed of assets that weren't yours. That's not a confusion, Ralph. That's unlawful deceit. You wouldn't file charges against your own son," he stated, but doubt had slipped into his words. "I already have," I answered gently. "The documents were submitted this afternoon." The hue faded from his face. "You're pretending." Instead of debating, I rotated my computer display toward him, revealing the case submission in the county records system. Ralph Campbell versus Campbell Enterprises and Judith Campbell. Deceit, imitation, misappropriation of assets. "Jesus, Mom," he murmured, dropping into the seat opposite my desk. "What are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done ages ago," I stated, holding my tone steady despite the pain in my heart. "I'm making you responsible." Alexis shifted to Ralph's side, her palm on his shoulder. Her look had changed from anger to scheming. There has to be a method to settle this, she stated, her pitch abruptly appeasing. We're kin, after all. Kin doesn't pilfer from kin, I highlighted. Kin doesn't imitate signatures or fabricate legal papers. It was an error, Ralph stated, his prior fury crumbling into urgency. I truly believed you wouldn't object, that you'd be pleased to support our wedding this way. By having my beach home taken from me. The one item I retained for myself after years of placing everyone else ahead. We can discover another approach to cover the wedding, Alexis inserted swiftly. Reduce the scale, perhaps fewer attendees, a different location. I observed her, observing how rapidly she'd moved from justified outrage to negotiation when confronted with no wedding whatsoever. This isn't about the wedding, Alexis. This is about reliance and regard, both of which have been permanently harmed. Ralph bent forward, his look sincere. Mom, please, we can repair this. I'll compensate you. I promise. Just abandon the legal matters. Allow the wedding to happen. We can resolve the beach home issue later. For an instant, one frail, maternal instant, I nearly pondered it. The begging in his gaze activated that basic drive to guard my offspring, to ease his route, to fix everything. Then I recalled the cocky grin at the rehearsal dinner. The relaxed declaration of his theft offered as a done deal. The years of monetary reliance disguised as childlike loyalty. No, I declared resolutely. The legal actions will proceed. The wedding support has been retracted. The beach home transaction is being overturned. And as of this morning, all monetary aid from me has ceased, including your entry to my charge cards, the regular transfers to your bank profile, and the trust fund payouts I've been approving, despite the trust's condition requiring work. You can't do that, Alexis erupted, her facade of sensibility crumbling. The wedding is in 3 days. Everything's covered. Actually, it's not, I amended her. The concluding payments were scheduled for tomorrow. Payments I've notified all suppliers will not be made. And the initial deposits you placed with the proceeds from the deceitful home sale, those will probably need to be refunded when the sale is nullified. Ralph stared at me, real terror supplanting his prior assurance. Mom, you don't get it. We have folks traveling in from across the nation. Alexis's relatives have welcomed their whole social group. We can't simply cancel. You should have thought of that before disposing of assets that weren't yours, I responded, astonishing myself with my firmness. Actions carry repercussions, Ralph. It's evidently a teaching I neglected to impart, but you're grasping it now. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping on the wooden floor. This isn't finished, he cautioned, his voice shaking with a blend of anger and fear. You want conflict? You've got it. I don't want conflict, Ralph. I never have. What I want is respect for my limits, my belongings, and my independence, something you obviously don't comprehend. Come on, babe. Alexis pulled at his arm, her polite mask entirely discarded now. We need to sort this out. My dad knows individuals, attorneys. We can contest this. As they headed toward the exit, I called out. One more item, Ralph. He stopped but didn't pivot. Review your mail tomorrow, I stated calmly. There's something you should view. After they departed, I sat in the quiet of my flat, the clash replaying in my thoughts. I had anticipated feeling remorseful or devastated after confronting my son. Instead, I felt freed, as if I'd finally set down a load I'd carried for years. My phone rang. Barbara, staying late as always. Judith, she started directly. Marcus updated me on the circumstances. I've locked all the profiles Ralph could access and terminated the charge cards. I've also drafted a media announcement in case this becomes public, which it could, given the wedding scale and the Thornton social ties. Thank you, Barbara, I stated, real appreciation in my words. I don't know how I'd manage without you. That's what chosen kin is for, she answered softly. Barbara had stood by me for 15 years, through separation, business conflicts, and personal hardships. She'd observed Ralph's privilege expand, had seen my facilitation of it, and had never once criticized me. There's one additional thing, I stated, reaching an abrupt choice. I need you to dispatch a parcel to Ralph's flat. Registered mail for arrival tomorrow. What sort of parcel? I grinned darkly, thinking of the proof Marcus had assembled. The type that guarantees he comprehends exactly what he's confronting if he persists on this course. After disconnecting, I proceeded to my sleeping area and opened my wardrobe, shifting past tailored outfits until I located the clothing bag at the rear, the mother-of-the-groom gown I'd acquired months prior. Before knowing my son was capable of such disloyalty. A basic, graceful dress in soft blue that I'd been quietly eager to wear. I took it from the bag and placed it on my bed, a concrete symbol of the festivity that would now never take place, at least not with my participation. Given Ralph and Alexis's resolve, they might still assemble some form of their wedding, though it would scarcely be the elite gathering they'd imagined. My phone vibrated with a message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Jennifer Thornton, Alexis's mom. We need to converse." I stared at the note, weighing my choices. Alexis's relatives were traditional wealth, but lacking in liquid assets, something Ralph had noted disdainfully when they'd hesitated to add more to the wedding. "I'm open for breakfast tomorrow." 9 a.m. at the Pierre, I messaged back, selecting a public spot where any discussion would have to stay polite. Her reply arrived instantly. "I'll be there." As I got ready for sleep that evening, I found myself questioning if I'd overstepped. If my justified fury had driven me to ruin not only my bond with my son, but his future contentment too. Then I recalled Marcus's statement. "He's been reckless with your persona and holdings for years." This wasn't a frantic single error. This was the peak of years of privilege and deceit. And continuing to facilitate it wouldn't aid Ralph. It would only delay the unavoidable collapse when my resources or tolerance eventually depleted. No, I resolved as I switched off the light. I hadn't overstepped. If anything, I hadn't acted sufficiently years earlier when the initial indications of Ralph's privileged mindset had surfaced. But it wasn't too late to adjust direction now. Painful as it might be for us both. Tomorrow would present fresh obstacles. The discussion with Jennifer Thornton, the aftermath from the legal actions, the unavoidable online frenzy when 300 wedding attendees got cancellation alerts. But for the first time in ages, I would tackle those obstacles as Judith Campbell, not merely as Ralph's mom or his private cash source. It was time to recover my existence, my beach home, and my dignity, even if it meant losing my connection with my sole offspring. The Pierre's refined morning meal area buzzed with subdued talk and the soft ting of utensils on delicate porcelain. I showed up 15 minutes ahead, a practice from years of professional gatherings, and claimed a side table overlooking both the doorway and Central Park past the panes. Jennifer Thornton arrived right at 9, impeccably attired in a Chanel ensemble that showed signs of wear. Her light hair, the origin of Alexis's blonde strands, was arranged in a chignon, and her stance exuded the sort of inherent grace that stems from generations of etiquette training. "Judith," she acknowledged me with a cool inclination, claiming the seat facing me. "Appreciate you consenting to meet." Naturally, I answered, just as proper. We had encountered each other only a few times during Ralph and Alexis's 2-year romance, each meeting defined by courteous separation. The Thorntons were Boston elite, heirs of transport tycoons who had squandered most of their riches, but preserved their societal position through prudent unions and the tactical use of their leftover resources. Jennifer had never fully concealed her view that Ralph, despite his elite schooling and my economic support, wasn't entirely their match in lineage. A server materialized to record our requests. Tea for Jennifer, coffee for me, with baked goods neither would sample. "I presume you understand why I wished to talk with you," she commenced once we were solitary again. "I can surmise," I stated evenly. "Your daughter returned home with a rather disturbing tale yesterday." Jennifer's impeccably groomed fingers drummed a faint beat on the table covering. "Yes, she did. A quite alarming one involving deceit accusations, withdrawn suppliers, and a beach home that evidently wasn't Ralph's to dispose of." "That's a precise overview." "Judith," she leaned in a touch, her volume reduced. "Is this truly essential? This open display of private issues, the wedding is 3 days out. Attendees are already coming from Europe." I didn't select the schedule, I noted. Ralph did when he chose to dispose of my asset without my knowledge or approval. "Men commit errors," she stated, a casual flick of her hand implying this was a small violation rather than a serious crime. particularly young men enamored. Certainly, there's a way to handle this discreetly. After the wedding, I observed her attentively, noting the strain near her eyes despite her rehearsed poise. Jennifer, let me be straightforward. Your daughter and my son plotted to cheat me out of a major holding to finance a wedding neither could pay for. This isn't a mix-up or a youthful lapse. It's an offense. An offense, she echoed, as if evaluating the term. That's quite theatrical, isn't it? Not per the district attorney's office, which has launched a probe based on the proof my firm's legal group supplied. The color left Jennifer's face. You've engaged the officials over a kin issue. Deceit isn't a kin issue, I responded, maintaining my tone balanced despite my increasing annoyance. And honestly, I'm astonished you're supporting their conduct. Would you be so forgiving if Alexis's trust had been plundered without her awareness? Something glinted in Jennifer's eyes, a swift, calculating reevaluation. What precisely do you seek, Judith? To penalize Ralph? To shame Alexis? To impose your authority? I want what was taken from me restored, I stated plainly. I want recognition of the harm done. And I want to set firm limits with my son moving ahead. Jennifer drank her tea, gaining moments. When she placed the cup down, her look had altered subtly. May I speak openly? Please. Alexis shared something intriguing last night after their trip to your flat. She mentioned Ralph assured her you'd relent, that you always yielded eventually when he pressed sufficiently. Jennifer's stare was abruptly piercing. Is that accurate? The inquiry surprised me. I suppose I have facilitated him in specific manners. More than specific manners, I imagine, she proceeded. Ralph has been existing far above his resources since university, from what I gather. Designer attire, opulent trips, that absurdly costly flat in Tribeca, all on earnings that couldn't conceivably cover half those costs. I assisted him, I admitted, unease seeping in at having my child-rearing decisions analyzed by this lady I scarcely knew. He's my only offspring. I wanted him to have chances. Chances, Jennifer echoed. Or privilege. I stiffened. I don't believe you're qualified to critique my bond with my son. Perhaps not, she yielded. But I am qualified to evaluate the man my daughter plans to wed. And what I'm observing worries me deeply. This exchange was not unfolding as I'd foreseen. I had expected requests for mercy, maybe warnings of societal exclusion, not this examining review of Ralph's personality. What are you implying, Jennifer? She set her napkin on the table and reclined in her seat. I'm implying that although I arrived here planning to persuade you to retract your legal steps and permit this wedding to continue, I find myself rethinking that stance. You don't want them to marry? I questioned, truly astonished. What I desire, she stated cautiously, is for my daughter to wed someone with honor, someone who addresses issues truthfully, not by taking from his mother and anticipating her to pardon him because she always has previously. The direct evaluation hurt, but I couldn't refute its precision. Ralph is able to do better, I stated, though the justification rang empty, even to me. Is he? Or has he never had to be, because you've always been there to tidy up his disarrays? We remained quiet for an instant, the heaviness of her statements settling between us. I had arrived ready for a clash with an opponent. Instead, I was confronting an unforeseen partner, one who perceived my son perhaps more distinctly than I'd allowed myself to. What are you suggesting? I asked eventually. Jennifer sat up straighter, efficient professionalism supplanting her prior inquiring interest. I suggest we permit this circumstance to develop organically. You carry on with your legal actions. The wedding is canceled, or at minimum delayed, until they can finance it properly. And we both watch how Ralph and Alexis manage this emergency. You want to evaluate them, I understood. I want to observe their authentic natures, she amended. How they react to hardship will reveal much more than how they rejoice in abundance. Alexis won't be pleased with you, I noted. A slight, sorrowful grin appeared on Jennifer's face. No, she won't. But being a mother isn't about ensuring our children are content right now. It's about directing them toward becoming their finest selves, even when that direction hurts. The straightforward insight of her words struck me profoundly. Wasn't that precisely what I'd failed to accomplish with Ralph? Favoring his instant satisfaction over the tougher teachings that might have molded him into a superior individual. There's something else you should be aware of, I stated, making a sudden choice to trust this woman who had displayed surprising profundity. Ralph is in considerable debt beyond what you might realize. Charge cards, personal advances, even some dubious monetary actions involving my identity. The beach home deceit isn't a standalone event. Jennifer nodded, not shocked. I suspected as much. Alexis said he's been managing all the wedding finances because he's skilled with money. An assertion that appeared questionable given his way of life versus his real earnings. If they do wed eventually, I stated cautiously, she would be assuming that monetary load. And if the district attorney files charges, possibly a spouse with a criminal history. Jennifer added, her look stern. Neither scenario is what I pictured for my daughter's future. We concluded our morning meal in an odd, reflective partnership, planning not as rivals, but as two mothers worried about the moral growth of our grown children. By the time we separated with a stronger grip than the one we'd shared upon arriving, we had settled on a joint position. No meddling with the legal outcomes of Ralph and Alexis's deeds, but ongoing frank dialogue between us as the situation progressed. One final item, Jennifer stated as we left the eatery. What was in the parcel you sent Ralph? Alexis referenced something about him needing to check his mail. I grinned darkly. Proof. Bank records displaying unauthorized shifts, credit histories documenting profiles opened in my name without my awareness, advance requests with imitated signatures, everything Marcus's group discovered during their probe. Jennifer's elegantly shaped brows lifted slightly. That should provide engaging morning perusal. I thought he should comprehend exactly what he's facing if he keeps on this route. Scorched earth, she whispered, a trace of respect in her tone. I wouldn't have anticipated that from you, Judith. Neither would Ralph, I answered. That's exactly the issue. As I observed her enter the rear of a waiting sedan, I experienced an unforeseen feeling of confirmation. Jennifer Thornton, Boston noble and judge of societal norms, had basically supported my strict position against my own son. The burden of remorse I'd been bearing eased a bit, replaced by the assurance that occasionally strict affection was the only type that really counted. Back at my workplace, I discovered Barbara awaiting with a pile of notes and a worried look. The Rosewood Resort contacted, she told me as I positioned myself behind my desk. They want to confirm if they should continue with wedding preparations tomorrow or if the occasion is formally canceled. Evidently, Ralph has been phoning them constantly, guaranteeing the payment is arriving. The occasion is formally canceled, I affirmed. They can reach Ralph directly for any fines or charges linked to the delayed cancellation. Barbara inclined her head, jotting a reminder. Also, Marcus phoned. The district attorney wants to meet with you this afternoon to talk about possible accusations. My gut clenched. The brief confidence from my morning meal with Jennifer weakening. Criminal accusations against my son, my sole child. Judith. Barbara's voice pierced my reflections. Should I inform him you'll attend? I inhaled deeply, stabilizing myself. Yes, arrange it. And Barbara, I believe I'll need you to join me. Of course, she answered without pause. Always. The basic confirmation, so unlike Ralph's conditional faithfulness, brought sudden tears to my eyes. Barbara had supported me through my separation, through establishing Campbell Enterprises into a powerful firm, through medical alarms and professional victories. She had never requested more than her compensation and my esteem, yet had offered me steadfast backing through every ordeal. Thank you, I said softly, for all of it. She inclined her head, comprehension flowing between us without elaboration. The vehicle will be prepared at 2 for the DA's office. And Judith, no matter what occurs, you're making the correct choice. As she exited my office, my phone vibrated with a message from Ralph. We need to converse now, by ourselves. I gazed at the note, envisioning him unsealing the registered parcel, viewing the pile of proof cataloging his years of monetary scheming. His alarm would be intensifying now. The awareness that this wasn't solely about the beach home, but about a pattern of conduct that could carry grave legal repercussions. I have appointments all day, I texted back. I'm free tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. His reply came right away. This can't delay. I'm heading to your workplace. Before I could respond, my desk phone rang. The front desk downstairs. Miss Campbell, your son is here. He's very persistent about meeting you. Security is inquiring if they should bring him up or send him away. I closed my eyes momentarily, assessing my options. Facing Ralph in my work environment would uphold limits and block the sentimental control he'd mastered in closer settings, but it also chanced a spectacle, something I'd avoided at all costs for years. Send him up, I resolved. And Janet, notify security to remain ready just in case. Yes, ma'am. 5 minutes later, my office door flew open as Ralph charged in. His usually flawless look was messy, eyes red, costly shirt creased, hair unkempt. In his grasp, he held the file I'd sent him. What the hell is this? He demanded, slamming the papers onto my desk. Credit histories, advance requests. You're monitoring me now. I stayed seated, upholding the poise I'd honed through innumerable business talks. It's not monitoring when their profiles open deceitfully in my name, Ralph. It's called defending myself. This is crazy, he snarled, striding before my desk. You're behaving like I'm some sort of criminal genius. I aired with the beach home. Fine, I confess that. But this, he motioned at the file, this is reputation destruction. Those are truths, Ralph. Records of monetary choices you've made using my name, my credit, my persona, without my awareness or approval. I was going to repay it all, he asserted, dragging a hand through his messy hair. Once I established myself professionally, once Alexis and I were stable. The same way you were going to restore my beach home someday, I questioned doubtfully. With what funds, Ralph? You've been building your profession for a decade while maintaining a lifestyle that demands triple your real earnings. He sank into the chair facing me, abruptly appearing very youthful and very scared. What do you expect from me, Mom? To plead? To implore? Okay, I'm remorseful. I made errors, awful ones, but don't do this. Don't send me to prison. The stark fear in his gaze breached my maternal shield, sparking that fundamental drive to safeguard my child no matter his deeds. For an instant, one frail, uncertain instant, I contemplated contacting Marcus, withdrawing the accusations, finding another path. Then I remembered Jennifer's words at breakfast. Motherhood isn't about making our children happy in the moment. It's about guiding them toward becoming the best versions of themselves, even when that guidance is painful. I'm meeting with the district attorney this afternoon, I said quietly. There will be consequences for your actions, Ralph. Legal ones, financial ones, personal ones. But what those consequences look like, that's still being decided. Mom, please, he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. I'll do anything. Just don't let them arrest me. I studied my son, this man I'd raised, this person I'd failed in basic ways by protecting him too well from the natural outcomes of his decisions. I can't promise that, I replied truthfully. But I can promise you this. Whatever happens, it will be with the goal of helping you become the man I know you can be, the man you should have been all along. Ralph stared at me as if I were a stranger. In many ways, I suppose I was the mother he knew, the one who had rescued him from every financial crisis, who had ignored his growing entitled behavior, who had prioritized his comfort over her own boundaries. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone he clearly didn't recognize, a woman unwilling to sacrifice her self-respect on the altar of maternal obligation. You can't be serious, he finally said, his voice empty. You'd let them prosecute your own son? Put me in jail. I'm not letting anything happen, Ralph, I replied, keeping my composure despite the ache in my chest. These are the natural consequences of your actions, actions you took willingly, repeatedly, over years. Everyone makes mistakes, he insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. Mistakes are accidental, I corrected him. Nothing in that file was accidental. Every forged signature, every fraudulent application, every unauthorized transfer, those were deliberate choices. He slumped in the chair, the fight draining from him. So that's it? You're just done with me. The question cut deeper than he could know. Was I done with him? Could a mother ever truly be done with her child? I thought of Jennifer's measured approach, her willingness to let consequences unfold naturally as a test of character rather than punishment. I'm not done with you, Ralph, I said softly. I'm done enabling behavior that hurts both of us. There's a difference. What am I supposed to tell Alexis? He asked, vulnerability replacing his earlier defensiveness. The wedding's in 3 days. Her family has people flying in from everywhere. We'll be humiliated. You should tell her the truth, I suggested. All of it, not just the parts that make you seem like a victim of your unreasonable mother. The unauthorized accounts, the forged documents, the mountain of debt you've accumulated. His eyes widened in alarm. I can't tell her that, she'd leave me. I finished when he paused. If the only thing holding your relationship together is her belief in your financial stability, then perhaps that's information she deserves before making a lifelong commitment. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Neither was selling my beach house without permission, I countered. Neither was using my identity to secure loans. Neither was lying to your fiancé about your financial situation. We sat in tense silence for a moment, the weight of years of deception and enabling hanging between us. Through my office window, Manhattan extended in a vista of ambition and repercussion, a city that rewarded cleverness but punished recklessness. I had maneuvered its harsh terrain successfully for decades. Perhaps it was time Ralph learned to do the same without my resources as a safety net. The district attorney may be open to a plea deal, I said finally, breaking the quiet. One that includes repayment, community work, and financial supervision instead of prison time. Hope sparkled in his eyes. You'd help me with that? I'll help you face the consequences of your actions with dignity, I clarified. I won't help you avoid them. And the wedding, he asked tentatively. That's between you and Alexis. But it won't be at the Rosewood with my financial support, and it certainly won't be funded by the fraudulent sale of my beach house. Ralph rubbed his hands over his face, reality seeming to finally settle in. Everything's collapsing, he murmured, more to himself than me. The wedding, my credit, possibly my freedom, all because of one mistake. Not one mistake, I corrected gently. A pattern of choices that led you here, choices you have the power to make differently going forward. He looked up, something new crossing his features, a glimpse, perhaps, of the responsible adult he might have become without my excessive buffering. What would that even look like? Starting over at 32 with nothing. You don't have nothing, Ralph, I said. You have an education, intelligence, charm when you choose to use it for something other than manipulation. And you have a mother who loves you enough to stop protecting you from reality. My intercom buzzed, Barbara reminding me of my upcoming meeting with the district attorney. Ralph glanced at the phone, then back at me, the reality of his situation apparently striking him anew. Will you call me after? He asked, his voice small. Let me know what they say? Yes, I promised. But Ralph, you need to prepare yourself, and you need to be honest with Alexis today. Because this isn't going away. He nodded slowly, collecting the scattered papers from my desk and placing them back in the folder. As he stood to leave, he hesitated, uncertainty etched on his features. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry, not just for getting caught. For everything. The words sounded genuine, perhaps the first truly remorseful thing he'd said since this ordeal began. I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately needed to. But years of enabling had taught me to be cautious of Ralph's timely regret. Show me, I replied simply. Don't tell me, show me with your actions going forward. After he left, I sat motionless, the enormity of what lay ahead pressing heavily on my shoulders. In a few hours, I would sit across from a district attorney and discuss criminal charges against my only child. I would provide evidence that could fundamentally alter the course of Ralph's life. I would, in many ways, be complicit in his public downfall. And yet, a small voice inside insisted this was the most maternal thing I had done for him in years, not shielding him from consequences, but ensuring he faced them while he was still young enough to rebuild, still capable of learning the lessons that might transform him into the man he could be. Barbara appeared in my doorway, coat in hand, ready to accompany me to the district attorney's office. Her expression held no judgment, only quiet support. Ready? She asked. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders and gathering my resolve. As ready as I'll ever be. The car ride downtown passed in thoughtful silence. I watched the city blur past my window, thinking of all the battles I'd fought in boardrooms and courtrooms over the years. None had felt as consequential as this, a mother's stand not against her son, but for his character. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Thornton. Alexis just called, hysterical, says Ralph admitted to financial irregularities and the wedding might be postponed. Progress. I smiled faintly at her businesslike assessment, typing back, meeting with DA now. We'll update after. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I was no longer alone in this painful recalibration of parental boundaries. And that, unexpected as it was, felt like its own kind of progress. The district attorney's office was precisely as uninspiring as one might anticipate: institutional beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, and the faint scent of stale coffee. Marcus met us in the lobby, his usually impeccable suit appearing slightly wrinkled after what had clearly been a long day of legal maneuvering. "They're waiting for us," he said without introduction. "I should warn you, Judith, the evidence is compelling. DA Hernandez is taking this very seriously, especially given the dollar amounts involved." I nodded, bracing myself. "And what are our options?" "Best case, Ralph agrees to full restitution, accepts felony charges, but gets a suspended sentence with probation and financial monitoring. Worst case, they push for jail time given the pattern of fraud." The word jail sent a chill through me despite my earlier resolve. Images of Ralph in an orange jumpsuit, surrounded by hardened criminals, flashed unbidden through my mind. Was I really prepared to let that happen? Barbara must have sensed my wavering because she placed a steadying hand on my arm. "One step at a time," she murmured. "Let's hear what they have to say first." DA Hernandez was a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She greeted me with professional courtesy but wasted no time on small talk. "Ms. Campbell, I've reviewed the evidence your legal team provided regarding your son's activities," she began, gesturing to the thick file before her. "The unauthorized sale of corporate property is troubling enough, but the pattern of identity theft and financial fraud elevates this considerably." I nodded, maintaining my composure. "I understand. What I'm trying to determine," she continued, studying me carefully, "is whether you're fully committed to pursuing charges. These cases within families can be complicated. Emotions often interfere with the legal process." "I'm committed to justice," I replied carefully. "But I'm also a mother who wants what's best for her son in the long run." "Those two things aren't necessarily in conflict." Hernandez leaned back, something like approval flickering across her features. "Fair enough. In that case, I'd like to propose a potential resolution." For the next hour, we discussed parameters for a plea agreement, one that would hold Ralph accountable while offering him a path to redemption, full restitution for all fraudulent transactions, felony charges on his record, but with a suspended sentence contingent on strict compliance with financial monitoring, 2 years of probation, community service focused on financial literacy education for at-risk youth. "He'll need to surrender his passport," Hernandez added, "and agree to regular check-ins with a probation officer. Any violation, no matter how small, would trigger the suspended sentence." "And the beach house?" I asked. "The fraudulent sale is already being handled by our real estate fraud division. The buyers will be informed that they purchased property through fraudulent means, and the transaction will be reversed. They may have civil recourse against your son, but that's separate from our criminal proceedings." By the time we left the DA's office, a framework had been established, one that would require Ralph's cooperation and genuine contrition, but would spare him the worst consequences of his actions. Whether he would accept it remained to be seen. Outside on the courthouse steps, Barbara squeezed my hand. "You did well in there," she said quietly. "Firm but fair." Did I? I wondered aloud. Or am I still protecting him, just in a different way? "There's a difference between protection and destruction, Judith," she pointed out. "You're offering him accountability with dignity. That's not enabling, it's wisdom." I nodded, grateful for her perspective as we made our way to the waiting car. My phone had been off during the meeting, and when I powered it on, a flood of notifications appeared: missed calls from Ralph, texts from Jennifer, and a voicemail from an unknown number that turned out to be Alexis. Her message was tearful but coherent. "Ms. Campbell, it's Alexis. Ralph told me everything about the fraud, the debt, all of it." I don't know what to say except I had no idea. I swear I didn't know about the beach house until after it happened. Please call me back, please. I played the message twice, trying to discern whether her distress was genuine or performative. The Alexis I'd encountered previously seemed primarily concerned with appearances and social standing. This vulnerable, seemingly honest voice was unfamiliar. Are you going to call her back? Barbara asked as our driver navigated afternoon traffic. Not yet, I decided. I need to speak with Ralph first. When I called him, he answered on the first ring. Mom, what happened? What did they say? There's a potential plea arrangement, I told him, keeping my voice neutral. We need to discuss it in person. Can you come to my apartment at 7 o'clock? Yes, he agreed immediately. Of course, anything, Mom. I told Alexis everything. She's well, she's not taking it well. I would imagine not, I replied dryly. Few brides dream of marrying a man facing felony fraud charges. That's not fair, he protested, though with less conviction than before. She's upset about the dishonesty more than the legal stuff, says she can't believe I've been hiding financial problems from her all this time. Something in his tone caught my attention, a note of genuine surprise, as if Alexis's moral objection to his behavior was unexpected. Perhaps there was more substance to my almost daughter-in-law than I'd given her credit for. 7 o'clock, I reminded him. We have a lot to discuss. By the time Ralph arrived at my apartment that evening, I had reviewed the plea agreement details with Marcus twice, prepared a summary of financial restitution requirements, and fortified myself with a glass of wine and Barbara's unwavering support. She had offered to stay for the conversation, but this was one confrontation I needed to handle alone. Ralph appeared at my door looking like a shadow of himself, pale, drawn, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept since our earlier confrontation. The arrogant young man who had announced selling my beach house with such smug confidence had vanished, replaced by someone who finally seemed to grasp the gravity of his situation. The district attorney is offering a plea deal, I began once we were seated in my living room. Felony charges, but with a suspended sentence contingent on strict compliance with probation requirements. No jail time, provided you meet all conditions. Relief flooded his features. Thank God. Mom, I held up a hand, stopping him. Don't thank me yet. The conditions are substantial. I laid out the plea agreement's terms with the same precision I'd use in a boardroom presentation, each requirement articulated clearly, each consequence explicitly defined. As I spoke, I watched Ralph's expression shift from relief to dismay to something approaching genuine humility. Full financial restitution, I continued, consulting my notes. That means repaying every fraudulent charge, every unauthorized loan, plus interest and legal fees. The DA estimates the total around $230,000, not including whatever you received from the beach house sale, which will be nullified separately. $230,000? Ralph repeated weakly. I don't have that kind of money. Which is why the agreement includes a structured payment plan over 5 years, I explained. You'll also surrender your passport, submit to weekly financial monitoring, and complete 500 hours of community service teaching financial literacy at a youth center. He slumped in his chair, the magnitude of the consequences finally seeming to sink in. And if I don't agree? Then the DA proceeds with the full range of charges, multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, falsification of documents, all with potential prison sentences. I don't have a choice, do I? He said quietly. You always have choices, Ralph. That's something I failed to help you understand earlier in life. I set my notes aside, meeting his gaze directly. The question is whether you'll finally make responsible ones. He was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, I saw something in his eyes I'd rarely witnessed before, genuine accountability. I'll do it, he said finally. All of it. And Mom, I really am sorry, not because I got caught, but because I betrayed your trust. I don't expect you to believe me now, but I'm going to prove it to you somehow. I nodded, not quite ready to accept his apology, but acknowledging the first step toward genuine remorse. There's something else we need to discuss, I said, shifting to the next difficult topic. The wedding. Ralph winced. It's off. Alexis called it off this afternoon after I told her everything. This surprised me, despite my conversation with Jennifer Thornton. Everything? The fraudulent accounts, the debt, the beach house. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. She was furious about the lying more than anything else, said she couldn't marry someone she couldn't trust. And how do you feel about that? I asked carefully. Devastated, he admitted, but also relieved in a weird way. Like, maybe I don't have to pretend anymore to be this successful, got it all together guy when I'm actually drowning in debt and bad decisions. The simple honesty of his statement caught me off guard. Was this the same son who, less than 48 hours ago, had laughed about stealing my beach house? Alexis left me a voicemail, I told him. She sounded genuinely distressed. She is, Ralph confirmed, and confused. She thought we had this perfect life lined up, the fancy wedding, the Manhattan apartment, vacations in the Hamptons. Finding out it was all smoke and mirrors, it was a lot for her to process. And her parents? A grimace crossed his features. Her father wants to kill me. Her mother, strangely enough, seems almost, I don't know, validated, like she suspected something wasn't right all along. I thought of Jennifer's perceptive assessment over breakfast and suppressed a small smile. Mothers often do. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of all that had transpired and all that was still to come settling around us. Outside my apartment windows, Manhattan twinkled in the early evening darkness, indifferent to our family drama. What happens now? Ralph finally asked, his voice small. Now you sign the plea agreement, meet with a probation officer, begin making restitution. I paused, considering my next words carefully. And find a job that actually pays your bills rather than depending on me to cover the difference. He flinched at the blunt assessment but nodded. My apartment lease is up next month. I won't be able to afford to renew it. No, I agreed. You won't. I could move in here temporarily, he suggested tentatively. Just until I find something affordable. The old me, the enabler who couldn't bear to see her son struggle, would have agreed immediately, eager to smooth his path despite his transgressions. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the disservice such help would be. No, Ralph, I said gently but firmly. That's not a healthy option for either of us. You need to stand on your own feet now, completely. Find a place you can afford on your actual salary, even if it's a studio in Queens instead of a luxury apartment in Tribeca. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded in resignation. I figured you'd say that. Can't blame me for trying, though. Old habits, I acknowledged with a small smile. For both of us. As Ralph prepared to leave, gathering the plea agreement papers to review with the attorney Marcus had recommended, he paused at the door. The beach house, he said hesitantly. I know the sale will be invalidated, but will you ever let me visit there again? Someday, I mean, when I've earned back some trust. The question pierced me unexpectedly. The beach house had been my sanctuary, my one purely selfish indulgence in a life otherwise dedicated to work and parenthood. The thought of Ralph there now, after what he'd done, made me instinctively recoil. And yet, someday I allowed. Not soon. But someday, if you demonstrate genuine change. It wasn't much, certainly not the automatic forgiveness he might have expected from me in the past, but it was a small opening, a tiny window of possibility contingent on actions rather than promises. After he left, I poured another glass of wine and carried it to my balcony, gazing out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Thornton. Alexis has officially canceled the wedding. Vendors notified. Guests being contacted. How did your meeting with Ralph go? I typed back, progress, slow, painful progress. Her response came swiftly, the best kind. Dinner next week? I find myself unexpectedly free of mother of the bride duties. I smiled, appreciating her dark humor amid what must be a social nightmare for her family. I'd like that. As I sipped my wine under the stars, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past 3 days, my beach house stolen and reclaimed, a wedding canceled, legal proceedings initiated against my own son, boundaries established that should have been in place decades ago. And yet, amid the wreckage of old patterns and false securities, something new was emerging, a healthier relationship with Ralph, perhaps built on reality rather than enabling, an unexpected friendship with Jennifer Thornton, and most importantly, a reclaiming of my own worth beyond maternal sacrifice. The path ahead wouldn't be easy for Ralph, facing the legal and financial consequences of his actions, or, for me, learning to love him without enabling his worst instincts. But for the first time in years, it felt like an authentic path rather than a well-worn groove of dysfunction. My phone buzzed again, Barbara checking in. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I replied truthfully. "One day at a time." "That's all any of us can do," she texted back. "Proud of you, boss." 3 simple words that meant more than she could know. I had spent my entire adult life being Ralph's mother, measuring my worth by his happiness and success. Learning to value myself independently, to be proud of my own choices rather than living through his, was perhaps the most profound change of all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The legal process would move forward. Ralph would begin the long journey of making amends and rebuilding his life on a foundation of truth rather than deception. I would reclaim my beach house, and with it, the peace I'd found there before his betrayal had temporarily tainted it. But tonight, under the vast, indifferent sky, I allowed myself to simply be Judith Campbell, not just a mother, not just a CEO, but a woman reclaiming her life one boundary at a time. The next morning brought a flurry of activity I hadn't anticipated. My phone began ringing at 7 a.m. with calls from unfamiliar numbers, wedding guests, I realized, seeking confirmation of the sudden cancellation they'd received via email late last night. I let them go to voicemail, having no desire to explain the complicated truth to distant relatives and social acquaintances. Barbara called as I was finishing my coffee. "You need to check the Post website," she said without introduction. "Page 6 has the story." My stomach dropped. "How bad is it?" Headline reads, "Socialite wedding cancelled after groom allegedly defrauds CEO mother." They don't have many details yet, but they mention the beach house and quote an anonymous source close to the bride, saying the wedding was called off due to shocking revelations of financial impropriety. I closed my eyes, imagining the social fallout. While I had been prepared for legal consequences, I hadn't fully considered how quickly this would become fodder for New York's insatiable gossip machine. "Are they naming Ralph explicitly?" I asked. "Yes," Barbara confirmed. "Both families, too. The Thorntons' Boston connections make this catnip for the society pages." "Wonderful," I muttered. "Just what we needed." After hanging up, I checked my email to find a message from Jennifer with the subject, "Damage Control." She had drafted a brief statement acknowledging the wedding's cancellation due to private family matters and requesting privacy during a difficult time. "Acceptable," she'd written. "My publicist recommends we present a united front." I sent back my approval, grateful for her pragmatic approach to the public relations nightmare. The statement wouldn't stop the speculation, but it might contain some of the more lurid theories that would inevitably circulate. My intercom buzzed, the doorman announcing a delivery. A few minutes later, I was signing for a large manila envelope from Marcus's office. Inside, I found the final plea agreement documents for Ralph's signature, along with a personal note from Marcus. D.A. Hernandez agreed to all terms. Ralph should sign ASAP before the media attention changes the political calculus. I texted Ralph immediately. "Need to see you this morning. Legal documents ready for signature. Media has the story." His response was immediate. "Saw the post. Coming over now." He arrived looking even more haggard than the previous evening, clutching a copy of the New York Post. The gossip column had been featured prominently on the tabloid's front page, complete with photos of Ralph and Alexis from some charity gala months earlier. "This is a nightmare," he said, collapsing onto my sofa. "I've had 17 calls from wedding guests, 3 from work colleagues, and 1 from my boss asking if I'm being charged with a crime." "Are you surprised?" I asked, handing him the plea agreement documents. "Actions have consequences, Ralph, sometimes very public ones." He took the papers with a resigned nod. "I know, I guess I didn't think beyond getting caught by you. Didn't consider that everyone would know." "Welcome to adulthood," I said, not unkindly, "where our choices affect more than just ourselves." As he reviewed the documents, initialing each page with a heaviness that spoke volumes, I made a pot of fresh coffee. When I returned with 2 mugs, I found him staring at the final signature page. "Once I sign this, I'm officially a felon," he said quietly. "My life changes forever." Your life already changed, I pointed out, settling in the chair across from him. The moment you decided to sell my beach house fraudulently. This just makes it official. He nodded, then signed his name with a finality that seemed to physically deflate him. What do I do now? He asked, looking suddenly very young and lost. Practically speaking, I mean, the apartment, the job, the debt. It was the most adult question I'd heard from him in years, perhaps ever. Not, how will you fix this for me, but how do I move forward myself? The distinction wasn't lost on me. First, you meet with the probation officer and financial monitor assigned to your case, I replied. They'll help establish a repayment plan based on your actual income. Second, you find an apartment you can genuinely afford, even if it's a significant downgrade. Third, you have an honest conversation with your employer about your situation. They'll fire me, he said gloomily. Maybe, I acknowledged. Financial fraud isn't exactly a selling point for an investment firm, but hiding it would only compound the problem. He gathered the signed documents carefully, returning them to the envelope. Alexis texted me this morning, said she's going to the Thorntons' place in Martha's Vineyard for a while to escape the media attention. A wise move, I agreed. Jennifer mentioned something similar yesterday. Ralph looked up sharply. You've been talking to Jennifer Thornton? We had breakfast yesterday, I said, seeing no reason to hide it. She's been surprisingly understanding about the situation. Understanding, he repeated incredulously. Her daughter just canceled her wedding because her fiancé turned out to be a criminal. What's to understand? Perhaps the fact that both of us raised children who valued appearances over substance, I suggested, who prioritized social standing over honesty. That's not fair to Alexis, Ralph protested. She didn't know about any of this. She's a victim here, too. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his defense of the woman who had abandoned him at the first sign of trouble. Is that how you see her, as a victim rather than a co-conspirator? She didn't know about the fraud, he insisted. The beach house sale, yes, she knew I was handling that, but she thought it was legitimate. I'm the one who lied to her about having your permission. This was new information, and it forced me to reconsider my assessment of Alexis. Perhaps Jennifer's faith in her daughter's character wasn't entirely misplaced. In any case, I said, steering the conversation back to practicalities, you both need to weather this media storm as best you can. The plea agreement includes a gag order on the specific details, which should help contain some of the damage. Ralph nodded, rising to leave with the signed documents. At the door, he paused. Mom, thank you. Not for bailing me out, you're not doing that this time, and I understand why, but for. I don't know, for still being here, I guess. For not completely washing your hands of me. The simple gratitude caught me off guard. For the first time in our confrontations, he was acknowledging my support without expecting it to absolve him of consequences. You're my son, Ralph, I said softly. That hasn't changed. What's changed is how I express my love for you, not by protecting you from consequences, but by helping you face them with dignity. After he left, I returned to my balcony with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the city awaken below. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a message from Alexis. Ms. Campbell, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned where the money for our wedding was coming from. I should have been suspicious when Ralph suddenly had access to funds we hadn't budgeted. I didn't steal your beach house, but I benefited from its theft, and for that, I am truly sorry. I hope someday you might forgive me. The message surprised me with its maturity and directness. Perhaps Alexis, like Ralph, was capable of more substance than I'd given her credit for. I typed back, "Thank you for your apology, Alexis. We all have lessons to learn from this situation. I wish you well as you navigate your path forward." Setting my phone aside, I gazed at the Manhattan skyline, contemplating how quickly life could change. A week ago, I had been preparing, albeit reluctantly, for my son's extravagant wedding. Now, I was navigating a media firestorm, legal proceedings, and the painful reconstruction of my relationship with Ralph. Yet, amid the chaos, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The beach house would be mine again. Ralph would face consequences that might finally forge him into the man he could become. And I was reclaiming my identity beyond motherhood, one difficult decision at a time. My phone rang, Marcus, with an update on the legal proceedings. Life moving forward, one step at a time. I took a deep breath and answered, ready to face whatever came next. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, media speculation, and careful reconstruction of boundaries. The gossip pages had moved on to fresher scandals after a few days of breathless coverage, leaving behind only the occasional reference to the Campbell-Thornton wedding debacle in society columns. Ralph had signed the plea agreement, met with his probation officer, and begun the humbling process of financial disclosure that would govern his life for the next 2 years. His employer, an investment firm understandably concerned about having an employee charged with financial fraud, had placed him on indefinite leave, effectively terminating him without the public embarrassment of an outright firing. I had maintained a careful distance, neither abandoning him nor rushing to smooth his path. Our interactions were brief, purposeful, and increasingly authentic, a new dynamic for both of us. On a crisp Friday morning, Marcus called with news I had been waiting for. "The beach house is officially yours again," he announced. Or rather, Campbell Enterprises again. The sale has been reversed, all documents nullified, and the property records corrected. Relief washed through me, more powerful than I had anticipated. And the buyers? Pursuing civil action against Ralph personally, as expected, Marcus confirmed. But they've been made whole financially, with interest. Their quarrel isn't with you or the company. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, genuine gratitude in my voice. "For everything." "Just doing my job," he replied modestly. "Though I must say, watching you stand your ground these past weeks has been inspiring. Not many parents would have had your resolve." After hanging up, I sat at my desk, contemplating what came next. The beach house was mine again, but the violation of its sanctuary remained a raw wound. Would I still find peace there, knowing what had happened? Or would Ralph's betrayal have permanently tainted the one place that had been purely mine? There was only one way to find out. I called Barbara into my office. "I'm going to the Hamptons for the weekend," I told her. "Hold my calls unless it's an emergency." She nodded, understanding without need for explanation. "The beach house is yours again as of this morning." "Good," she said simply. "Reclaim it, Judith. Don't let what happened change what that place means to you." The drive out to the Hamptons was familiar yet strange, colored by the knowledge of what had transpired. As I turned onto the quiet road leading to my property, I half expected to see strangers in the driveway, remnants of the fraudulent sale not yet fully excised. Instead, the house stood as it always had, a modest but elegant cedar-shingled cottage perched on a dune overlooking the Atlantic. My sanctuary, my one indulgence, mine again in every sense. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I took the keys from my purse, the originals I had kept even after Ralph's theft, and approached the front door. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it during my last visit months earlier. The furniture remained draped in protective covers, the kitchen pristine and untouched, the bookshelves still lined with my collection of novels and biographies. The buyers, it seemed, had never taken possession beyond the paper transaction. I moved through the room slowly, reacquainting myself with each space, running my fingers along familiar surfaces. In the master bedroom, I opened the French doors to the oceanside deck, breathing in the salt air and listening to the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. My phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer Thornton. "Heard the good news about the beach house, a victory worth celebrating. Dinner still on for tomorrow night." Over the past 2 weeks, Jennifer and I had developed an unexpected friendship, bonding over shared experiences as mothers of adult children navigating consequential mistakes. Our weekly dinners had become a highlight amid the legal and emotional turmoil. "Yes," I replied. "I'm at the beach house now." "How does it feel?" she asked. I considered the question, searching for the right words. Like reclaiming a piece of myself, I finally typed. "Hold on to that feeling," came her response. "It's hard-earned." As evening approached, I uncovered the furniture, opened windows to the ocean breeze, and prepared a simple dinner from provisions I'd brought. Sitting on the deck with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson, I felt the tension of recent weeks begin to ease. This place had always been my refuge, the one space where I was neither CEO nor mother, but simply Judith. Ralph's betrayal had temporarily stolen that sanctuary. But being here now, I realized the beach house's power came not from its physical structure, but from what it represented: my right to prioritize my own needs, to create boundaries, to exist independently of others' expectations. My phone rang, Ralph's number appearing on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, preserving this first evening of reclaimed peace. But something in me, perhaps the new honesty I was cultivating in all my relationships, compelled me to answer. "Hello, Ralph." "Mom." His voice sounded different, less entitled, more measured. "Marcus told me the beach house transaction was officially reversed today. I wanted to say I'm glad that it's yours again, where it belongs." The simple acknowledgement, offered without excuses or expectations, caught me by surprise. "Thank you," I said after a moment. "That means something coming from you." "Are you there now?" he asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "Just for the weekend." Is it the same? Does it still feel like your place?" The question revealed an awareness I wouldn't have credited him with weeks earlier, an understanding of how his actions might have damaged not just the legal ownership of the property, but its emotional significance to me. "I'm working on that," I answered honestly. "Some things can't be undone, Ralph, but they can be healed with time and effort." "I hope so," he said quietly. "For the beach house and for us." After we hung up, I remained on the deck, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Ralph's journey toward genuine accountability had only just begun, and there would inevitably be setbacks along the way. The entitlement and manipulation that had characterized our relationship for decades wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that something better might eventually emerge from the wreckage of our old patterns, something built on mutual respect rather than dependence and enabling. As darkness settled fully over the beach, I made a decision. Tomorrow, after breakfast, I would walk to the small local real estate office and inquire about properties in the area, not to replace this beach house, but to find a second one, a fresh start, untainted by past betrayals. Not because I was abandoning this sanctuary, but because I was finally embracing the truth that I deserved not just one space that was wholly mine, but as many as I chose to create for myself. For too long, I had measured my worth by what I sacrificed for others. Now, as I listened to the waves crashing against the shore, I understood that the most valuable gift I could give to myself and to Ralph was the courage to stop sacrificing what mattered most. My beach house was mine again, and more importantly, so was my life. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my new beach house, watching waves crash against the shore as morning sunlight danced across the water. Unlike my first property further down the coast, this one was perched on a rocky outcropping, offering dramatic views and a sense of solitary grandeur that suited my new perspective. "It's breathtaking," Jennifer remarked, joining me with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Our weekend retreats had become a tradition over the past months, a friendship neither of us had anticipated, but both now cherished. "Worth every penny," I agreed, accepting the coffee gratefully, though my financial advisor nearly had a stroke when I told him I was purchasing a second beach property. Jennifer laughed. "The benefits of being answerable only to yourself." That was the heart of it, really, the freedom I'd claimed since standing up to Ralph. The first beach house remained mine, its sanctuary slowly healing from the violation of his betrayal. But this new place represented something different, not recovery, but growth, a choice made not in reaction to loss, but in celebration of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Barbara. "Quarterly reports finalized. Everything looking strong. Enjoy your weekend off." In the months since Ralph's plea agreement, Campbell Enterprises had thrived under my refocused leadership. Freed from the constant drain of enabling my son's lifestyle, I had channeled that energy into strategic initiatives that expanded our market share and increased profitability. The board had noticed, approving performance bonuses for the entire executive team. "Any word from Alexis?" I asked Jennifer, who was scrolling through her own messages. "She's settling into the London office nicely," Jennifer replied. The transfer was exactly what she needed, a fresh start away from the gossip and speculation. After the wedding cancellation, Alexis had retreated briefly to Martha's Vineyard before requesting a transfer to her company's London branch. The move had proved transformative, giving her space to rebuild her identity beyond Ralph Campbell's jilted fiancé and the society pages that had feasted on the scandal. "And Ralph?" Jennifer asked carefully. "How is he managing?" I sipped my coffee, considering the question. "Making progress, slow, uneven progress, but progress nonetheless." The past 6 months had been a crucible for my son. After losing his investment firm job, he had struggled to find comparable employment with a fraud charge on his record. Eventually, he had secured a position at a small financial literacy nonprofit, ironically similar to the community service his plea agreement required, but now as legitimate employment. His Tribeca apartment was long gone, replaced by a modest one-bedroom in Astoria. His BMW had been sold to make restitution payments. His credit cards were limited to a single secured card with a $500 limit, carefully monitored by his probation officer. It was a humbling existence compared to his former lifestyle, but one he was gradually adapting to with more grace than I would have expected. "He's asked to visit the original beach house," I told Jennifer, voicing the dilemma that had been weighing on me recently. "Not to stay overnight, just for dinner. Says he wants to apologize properly in the place where it all began." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "And you're considering it?" "I am," I admitted. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined allowing him back there. But now you're secure enough in your boundaries that his presence won't threaten them," she finished for me. "Something like that," I agreed. "The question is whether it's too soon for him, not for me. Is he genuinely remorseful, or is this another manipulation, more subtle than before, but manipulation nonetheless?" Jennifer considered this, her gaze on the horizon. "Does your gut tell you he's changed?" "Parts of him have," I said carefully. "He's living within his means for the first time in his adult life, taking responsibility for his mistakes, actually listening when others speak instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. But 32 years of entitlement doesn't disappear in 6 months," I acknowledged. "I still see flashes of the old Ralph, the expectation that rules should bend for him, the subtle attempts to bypass consequences." "So test him," Jennifer suggested simply. "Set clear conditions for this visit. See if he respects them." It was the practical advice I'd come to value from our friendship, neither sentimental nor cynical, but grounded in reality and careful observation. "I think I will," I decided. Later that evening, after Jennifer had departed for her drive back to the city, I called Ralph. "About your request to visit the beach house," I began without preamble. "You've thought about it?" he asked, hope evident in his voice. "I have, and I'm willing, with conditions." "Name them," he said immediately. "First, it's a day visit only. You arrive at noon. You leave before sunset. Second, you come alone, no friends, no dates, no one else. Third, you respect my space, no wandering through rooms uninvited, no presuming familiarity you haven't earned back yet." I waited for pushback, the negotiation he would have automatically attempted 6 months ago. Instead, there was a pause. Then, "Those are fair terms. I accept them." "When?" The simple acquiescence surprised me. "Next Saturday," I decided. "I'll text you the details." After we hung up, I walked along the shoreline of my new property, contemplating the shifting dynamics with my son. We were building something different now, not the enmeshed, enabling relationship of the past, but something with clearer boundaries and more honest communication. Whether it would ever fully heal remained to be seen. Trust, once broken, could be repaired, but always bore the marks of its fracturing. Yet, for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that Ralph and I might eventually find a new equilibrium, not as financier and dependent, but as two adults navigating the complex territory of family bonds reconfigured by difficult truths. The following Saturday, I arrived at my original beach house early, preparing a simple lunch and ensuring the space felt both welcoming and clearly mine. At precisely noon, Ralph's car, a used Honda Civic that represented his new financial reality, pulled into the driveway. He emerged looking both familiar and changed. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple khakis and a button-down shirt. His hair was shorter, his posture less entitled, but somehow more grounded. He carried a small gift bag and a bouquet of wildflowers, not the extravagant arrangements he once would have ordered, but something he might actually have selected himself. "Mom," he greeted me on the porch, offering the flowers somewhat awkwardly. "Thank you for allowing this." "Come in," I said, accepting the bouquet. "Lunch is ready." As we ate on the deck overlooking the ocean, our conversation remained careful but not stilted. Ralph updated me on his job, his apartment, his compliance with the probation requirements. I shared news of Campbell Enterprises, my friendship with Jennifer, and carefully edited details about my new beach property. After lunch, he handed me the gift bag. "It's not much," he said, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Nothing like what I used to give you, but it's honest." Inside, I found a small hand-carved wooden box. When I opened it, a familiar melody played, the same lullaby I had sung to him as a child. "I made it," he explained, the flush deepening. "In a woodworking class I'm taking at the community center, part of my, trying to develop skills instead of just spending money." The simple gift touched me more deeply than any expensive trinket he had ever presented, not because of its monetary value, but because it represented actual effort, actual thought. "It's beautiful," I said simply. "Thank you." As the afternoon progressed, we walked along the beach, maintaining a physical and emotional distance that felt appropriate to our healing, but still damaged relationship. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ralph glanced at his watch and then back at the house. "I should go," he said, honoring the boundaries I had set without requiring my enforcement. "Thank you for today, for giving me a chance to see this place again and to apologize properly for what I did." I nodded, acknowledging both his apology and his respect for my terms. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated on the porch steps. "I heard through the grapevine that you bought another beach house further up the coast." "I did," I confirmed, not asking how he had learned this information. "I'm glad," he said, surprising me again. "Not because this place was tainted by what I did, but because you deserve to have as many spaces as you want that are just yours. I understand that now. I think what I took from you wasn't just property. It was sanctuary." The insight revealed a level of reflection I wouldn't have credited him with a year ago. "Yes," I agreed simply. "It was." As his car disappeared down the driveway, I returned to the deck, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The visit had gone better than I dared hope. Not perfect, not completely healed, but a step in the right direction. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," I replied. He respected the boundaries. Seems to be gaining genuine insight. "One day at a time," came her wise response. I smiled, tucking the phone away and returning my attention to the sunset. One day at a time indeed, not just for Ralph's redemption journey, but for my own path of reclaiming myself beyond motherhood. The beach house was fully mine again. My company was thriving. I had developed friendships and interests independent of my identity as Ralph's mother. And most importantly, I had learned that love, real love, not enabling or codependence, sometimes meant standing firm while someone you cared about faced the natural consequences of their choices. As darkness settled over the water, I raised my wine glass in a solitary toast to boundaries respected, to sanctuaries reclaimed, and to the unexpected strength that emerges when we finally stop surrendering our own needs to others' demands. My beach house, my life, my terms.